रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम। रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम। रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
पीड़ पराई जाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे।
पर दुखे उपकार करे सोए मन अभिमान नाणे रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कहिए।
सकल लोक मां सौने वंदे निंदा न करे केनी रे।
वाच काज मन निश्चल राखे। वाच काज मन निश्चल राखे। धन धन जननी तेनी रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कहिए।
समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी पर स्त्री जेने मात रे।
जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले। जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले। पर धन नव झाले हाथ रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कहिए।
मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जेने दृढ़ वैराग्य जना मन मारे।
राम नाम शु ताड़ी रे लागी। राम नाम शु ताड़ी रे लागी। सकल तीरथ तेना तन मारे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कहिए।
वण लोभी ने कपट रहित छे। काम क्रोध निवार्या रे।
भण नरसैयो तेनु दर्शन करता। भण नरसैयो तेनु दर्शन करता। कुल एको तीरता
भजन तो तेरे कहिए।
राम कहो रहमान कहो, राम कहो रहमान कहो, कोई नाम कहो महादेव रे।
राम कहो रहमान कहो, कोई नाम कहो महादेव रे।
राम कहो रहमान कहो, कोई नाम कहो महादेव रे। पारसनाथ को ब्रह्मा,
पारसनाथ को ब्रह्मा,
सकल ब्रह्म स्वयमेव रे।
राम कहो रहमान कहो, राम कहो रहमान कहो, राम कहो रहमान कहो, राम कहो रहमान कहो।
भाजन भेद कहावत नाना,
भाजन भेद कहावत नाना,
भाजन भेद कहावत नाना, एक मेटी का रूप रे।
एक मिट्टी का रूप रे।
भाजन भेद कहावत नाना, एक मिट्टी का रूप रे। ऐसे खंड कल्पना रोपित,
ऐसे खंड कल्पना रोपित,
आप अखंड स्वरूप रे।
राम कहो रहमान कहो, राम कहो रहमान कहो।
राम कहो रहमान कहो, कोई नाम कहो महादेव रे।
राम कहो रहमान कहो, कोई नाम कहो महादेव रे।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
सीताराम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम। रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम। रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
वैष्णव जन तो तेरे कहिए जे, पीड़ पराई जाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेरे कहिए जे, पीड़ पराई जाने रे।
पर दुखे उपकार करे सोए, मन अभिमान नाणे रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेरे कहिए।
भजन तो तेरे कहिए। समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्याग, पर स्त्री जैने मात रे।
जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले, जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले, पर धन नव झाले हाथ रे।
वैष्णव जन तो तेरे कहिए। मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जैने, दृढ़ वैराग्य जना मन मारे।
राम नाम शु ताड़ी रे लागी, राम नाम शु ताड़ी रे लागी, सकल तीरथ तेना तन मारे।
वैष्णव जन तो तेरे कहिए। वनलोभी ने कपट रहित छे, काम क्रोध निवार्या रे।
घणी नरसैयो ते
सकल लोकમાં સૌને વંદે, નિંદા ન કરે કેની રે।
वाच काछ मन निश्चल राखे,
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम।
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको
पर दुखे उपकार करे, वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कहिए।
सकळ लोकमा सौने वंदे, निंदान करे केली रे।
वाच काच मन निश्चल राखे, वाच काच मन निश्चल राखे, धन धन जननी तेनी रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कहिए।
समदृष्टीने तृष्णा त्यागी, पर स्त्री जेने मात रे।
जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले, जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले, पर धन नव झाले हाथ रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कहिए।
मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जेने, दृढ़ वैराग्य जना मन मारे।
राम नाम शु ताड़ीर लागी, राम नाम शु ताड़ीर लागी, सकल तीरथ तेना तन मारे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे
बड़ लोभी ने कपट रहित छे, रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम। सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान। रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम। सीताराम
वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कही।
सकल लोकमा सौने वंदे, निंदा न करे केरी रे।
बाच काछ मन निश्चल राखे, बाच काछ मन निश्चल राखे, धन धन जननी तेनी रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कही।
समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी, बर स्त्री जेने मात रे।
जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले, जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले, पर धन नव झाले हाथ रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही।
मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जेने, दृढ़ वैराग्य जना मन मारे।
राम नाम शु ताड़ीर लागी, राम नाम शु ताड़ीर लागी, सकल तीरथ तेना तन मारे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने रे कही।
बण लोभी ने कपट रहित छे, रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम। सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान। रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम। सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान। रघुपति राघव राजा राम, पतित पावन सीताराम। सीताराम सीताराम, भज प्यारे तू सीताराम। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान। ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान।
Okay, good evening and good morning to all of our guests and participants from around the world. We gather here today to commemorate Gandhi Jayanti and the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi and the International Day of Nonviolence. In order to start the program today, we're going to start with prayer for peace in the world. And I would like to ask Nishi Bandhu, the Secretary of the Peter Masber Gandhi Foundation, to lead us in prayer.
Thank you to our program director. All protocols observed. Warm greetings, ladies, gentlemen, and our dearest children. Please bow your heads in prayer. As we collectively celebrate the 154th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi and the 26th International Day of Nonviolence, help us, O Lord, to make practical at least a few of the 11 personal vows which Gandhiji took during his lifetime. Firstly, make our thoughts, words, and deeds reflect ahimsa, that is, non-violence. May our speech be ignited with truth or satya. Grant us the culture of non-stealing, known as asteya. Bestow upon us self-discipline, called Brahm Acharya. Help us to realize our pagriha, which is the idea of non-possession, to realize that all belongs to you, Almighty God. Give us the ability to labor for bread, that is sharir shrama, and not for the accumulation of wealth. Control our palate, asvada, so that we maintain excellent health. Present us, O Lord, with the trait of fearlessness, or sarvatra bhaya varjana, to eradicate sin from this world. Enlighten our minds to realize the equality of all religions, that is sarva dharma samantva. Encourage us to use locally made goods, swadeshi, at least to inspire us towards sparsh bhavana, that is, to bring about equity among all of your creation. We plead that you pardon what we have been, our Supreme Creator. Sanctify what we are, order what we shall be. Please grant us all a rebirth on this auspicious Gandhi Jayanti, so that our future actions shall be in the name of truth. Lead us to your glory, and ours the eternal salvation. Give us strength to do your will on this earth, now and forevermore. We thank you, our loving God. Om Asatoma Satkamaya, Tamsoma Jyotirkamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Kamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you, ladies, gentlemen, and children, for meditating on the prayer. I hand you over to our program director for this evening, Prem Namaste.
Muted. Please. Okay, thank you very much, Nishi. Let me introduce myself firstly. I'm David Kangan, the chairperson of the Peter Masber Gandhi Foundation, and it is our privilege this year to co-host this Gandhi Memorial Lecture with the Phoenix Settlement and Gandhi Development Trust in Durban, headed by Ila Gandhi. Let me say a few words before we get into the program. Firstly, we agreed when we organized this that the access to audio, that means the mic, will be extended only to the presenters. just from experience that we've had through the years with these platforms, there's a lot of interference from wherever people are. So the only people that have got audio access are the presenters. That does not mean that you shouldn't participate as the audience. We've got a team here that will be looking at chats through the course of the program. So if you have a comment to make or a question to ask, please just mention it on the chat with your name, and we will take it at the end. There is a question and answer session at the end. Now, the United Nations established the International Day of Nonviolence to commemorate the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, but also to highlight the Mahatma's unwavering commitment to nonviolence. According to the General Assembly resolution of 15th of June 2007, which established the commemoration, the International Day is an occasion to disseminate the message of nonviolence, including through education and public awareness. The resolution reaffirms the universal relevance of the principle of nonviolence and desire to secure a culture of peace, tolerance, understanding, and nonviolence. That's a quotation directly from the resolution. But the seed for the idea of a commemorative day was planted earlier in 2004 when the Iranian Nobel laureate Shirin Ebadi took a proposal for an International Day of Nonviolence to the World Social Forum, which was held in Mumbai. This idea attracted the interest of leaders in the Indian Congress Party at the time, culminating in a resolution taken at the Satyagraha conference in Delhi in January 2007, which was initiated by Sonia Gandhi, the then president of the Indian Congress, and ably supported by South Africa's Archbishop Desmond Tutu, calling for the United Nations to adopt the idea. Introducing the resolution in the General Assembly on behalf of 140 co-sponsors, India's Minister of State for External Affairs, Mr. Anand Sharma, said that the wide and diverse sponsorship of the resolution was a reflection of the universal respect for Mahatma Gandhi and of the enduring relevance of his philosophy. Quoting the late leader's own words, he said, and I quote, "Nonviolence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction devised by the ingenuity of man," unquote. At the first commemoration of the International Day of Nonviolence on 2nd of October 2007, the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon made the following remarks, and I quote, "The United Nations was created in the hope that humanity could not only end wars, it could eventually make them unnecessary. The founders hoped that the organization could help stop violence by spreading a culture of peace, promoting tolerance, and advancing human dignity. These same ideals sum up the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi, whose birthday we celebrate today. His peaceful struggles against unjust regimes in South Africa and India captured the world's imagination. When charged with agitation against the state in 1922, Gandhi responded, and I quote, "Nonviolence is the first article of my faith. It is also the last article of my creed," unquote. In this way, by incorporating nonviolence into everyday life, the Mahatma inspired countless individuals to lead better, more meaningful lives. Mahatma Gandhi is also a personal hero, he said, of his. And since he began his diplomatic career in India early in the 1970s, he said he has carried with him his definition of the 7 sins, which are wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, science without humanity, knowledge without character, politics without principle, commerce without morality, and worship without sacrifice. The Mahatma's inspiration is needed now more than ever. All around us, we see communities increasingly mired in rising intolerance and cross-cultural tensions. We see extremist dogma and violent ideologies gaining ground as moderate forces retreat. And we have witnessed lethal force being used against unarmed and non-violent marchers who have exemplified the very spirit of the Mahatma's teachings. May this International Day of Nonviolence give us strength to advance a true tolerance and nonviolence at every level, from the individual all the way up to the state. May this day help spread Mahatma Gandhi's message to an ever wider audience and hasten a time when every day is a day without violence. Unquote. That is the presentation that was made at the first International Day of Nonviolence in October 2007. I just want to, before we ask our keynote speaker to address us, I just wanted to just reflect on some of the quotations that Mahatma Gandhi himself indicated in terms of, I just want to mention three in terms of nonviolence. He said, poverty is the worst form of violence. Nonviolence is a weapon of the strong. And nonviolence and truth are inseparable and presuppose one another. One of the persons, many leaders that were influenced by Gandhi's philosophy was Dr. Martin Luther King. And he mentioned 6 principles, and I think that our keynote speaker will reflect on these in his speech. He mentioned 6 principles for nonviolent direct action, which are: nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. Nonviolence seeks to win friendships and understanding. Nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice or evil, not people. Nonviolence holds that unearned voluntary suffering for a just cause can educate and transform. And of course, our own Nelson Mandela from South Africa on nonviolence said the following: no problem is so deep that it cannot be overcome, given the will of all parties through discussion and negotiation rather than force and violence. Safety and security don't just happen. They are the result of collective consensus and public investment. We owe our children, the most vulnerable citizens in our society, a life free of violence and fear. No one can deny that mere absence of war does not mean peace. A broader and better definition, excuse me, is that peace can be the absence of violent conflict, including war, ethnic violence, the use of forcible means of conflict resolution, riots, civil wars, and killings of people. And we can also say that positively. So with that introduction, let me go to the introduction of our speaker today, which is Dr. Claiborne Carson. Dr. Carson is an American academic who is a retired professor of history at Stanford University and the former director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Institute. Dr. Carson was actually born in Buffalo, New York, and grew up near Los Alamos in New Mexico. He graduated from Los Alamos High School. He attended the University of New Mexico in his first year in college when he met Stokely Carmichael at a national student conference in Indiana, who convinced him to attend the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom as a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee on August 28, 1963, an event that was to trigger his involvement in the civil rights movement. His activism then started in student politics as a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and continues today, decades later, in the movement for nonviolence and peace, justice, and human rights. He obtained his academic qualifications from the University of California. His PhD dissertation was on Stokely Carmichael and the student movement, the Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. While studying at UCLA, he was also involved with anti-Vietnam War protests. Dr. Carson has served as a professor at Stanford University for more than 40 years, where he primarily taught US history and African-American history. He has also taught and lectured in many countries, including Britain, France, China, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, and of course, throughout the United States. Dr. Carson has been a member of several local and international associations and professional organizations. They're too numerous to mention here. He has written several books and articles regarding the civil rights movement and has made contributions as co-author to many more, as well as documentaries and interviews. His first book, In Struggle and the Black Awakening of the 1960s, was awarded the Frederick Jackson Turner Award in 1982. Dr. Carson was also the historical advisor for the film Freedom on My Mind, which in 1995 was nominated for an Oscar. In 1985, Coretta Scott King asked Dr. Carson to lead a project to edit and publish Martin Luther King's previously unpublished works, a project that he was involved with for over 3 decades. After initially turning the request down, he eventually agreed to oversee the project, on which he and his staff have dedicated many years in editing and publishing Dr. King's works. On April 3rd, 2018, Dr. Carson, as the director of the MLK Research and Education Institute, hosted a screening of a documentary that he helped create called I'm MLK Junior. After the screening, he hosted an additional event celebrating the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's last speech, which was I've Been to the Mountaintop. In 2019, on the occasion of the 150th anniversary of Gandhi's birth, Dr. Carson and others hosted a Gandhi King International Conference at Stanford University. That was when I met him for the first time. One of the outcomes of that conference was the establishment of the World House Project, an international network of individuals and organizations involved with peace and nonviolence and human rights at the Spogli Institute at Stanford under his directorship. The project sadly was terminated at the end of August this year, but the network continues with meetings held every Friday. In 2021, Dr. Carson was nominated by President Joe Biden to serve as a member of the newly formed Civil Rights Cold Case Records Review Board. He has received several awards and citations through the years, including the Frederick Jackson Turner Award of the Organization of American Historians for in Struggle, the Rosa Parks Distinguished Citizen Award, Martin Luther King Jr. from the Martin Luther King Jr. Association of Santa Clara Valley, the Gandhi King I Care Award from the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel, the Gandhi Institute for Reconciliation at Morehouse College, and the Freedom Flame Award from Selma Bridge Crossing Jubilee. And then finally, the Jamnalal Bajaj Foundation Award for promoting Gandhian values outside of India. He has received numerous honorary doctorates from the following institutions: Pacific Graduate School of Psychology, Morehouse College, Niagara University, and Westminster College, to name a few. Dr. Carson is married to Susan Ann Bay, and they have a daughter and a son. We had the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Carson to South Africa in June this year, where he participated in and delivered the keynote address at the opening of the Gandhi Mandela King International Conference in Pietermaritzburg, the city where the seed for Satyagraha was planted at the railway station, resulting from Gandhi's eviction from a first-class train compartment in June 1893. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure now to ask Dr. Carson to present the Gandhi Memorial Lecture for 2023. Dr. Carson.
Thank you so much, David. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm just not sure if my sound is on, so.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you so much. You've done a perfect introduction in the sense of describing so much that there's less for me to tell. But let me get started by where you ended. I think that this conference that you are holding is an important step in a long process of coming closer to not just Gandhi's dream as we celebrate his 151st birthday, but also Martin Luther King's dream. As you mentioned, I'm director of the World House Project, and that is a project that was inspired by Martin Luther King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? And I think that that book stimulated me to think about where we were after a long struggle for civil rights in the United States and after a long struggle against apartheid in South Africa, so many things that we were able to accomplish. But I think that that book reminds us that the work is not done. It is just beginning. What Martin Luther King mentioned in his last book took the metaphor of the World House from a plot for a novel in which a novelist was planning a story about a family that inherits a house that is occupied by diverse people from all over the world. And you can see what he was suggesting is that that's what we've inherited. We're living in that world house. We call it Earth. And it's occupied by diverse people. And Martin Luther King reminds us that those diverse people have to learn to live together. And he poses two very extreme opposite possibilities. One of them is chaos. That is, they remain strangers to one another. They fight and struggle and create violence among themselves, or they create a community, a new community, a world community. And that's what he saw as the remaining business at the time of his death. In 1968, we were just at the beginning of that process. And quite frankly, in 1968, that was at the beginning of my career as not as an activist so much as a scholar and an activist. So I think our challenge for all of us is to recognize how difficult the process will be to create a peaceful world house. Um, we have tried to do this through conferences, and I think we received a great boost when we had a conference, the Gandhi King conference at Stanford. I was amazed that a conference that started with no money, just a hope, ended up with 500 people, including you, David, and Ela Gandhi was there, and so many people from all over the world. And at the end of that conference, we made another pledge that we would continue the work of trying to build this global community. And of course, last June, when I went to South Africa, was to me a wonderful step forward in that process of, for the first time, bringing together the three major struggles of the last 50 years. And I think we can see actually the last 100 years, and we see the independence of India, the victories of the civil rights movement in the United States, and the end of apartheid in South Africa. And now we have to ask that question, where do we go from here? And I think that the conference in South Africa suggests that there are people all over the world who are not just waiting for the answers to that question, but understand that that is the challenge placed before them. And so as I, at least virtually, visit you in South Africa, I'm so pleased to be part of this process of carrying on a long struggle, century-long struggle, to bring about meaningful, lasting change in the world. And I think that the time now is more desperate than ever for us to recognize um, the the dangers of not completing that. You know, I invite my students here at Stanford to look at the daily newspaper, and judging from the articles that are in the newspaper, whether we are more likely to head toward chaos or head toward community. And I think that any of you would agree with me when we look at the daily news that it is not at all a given that we are moving in a positive direction toward that global community of human rights. And I think that part of that is that there's two sides of that movement. One of them is educational, and as you know, that's been certainly one of the focus points of my life of trying to educate people about human rights, and particularly educating them about the distinction between citizenship rights, the rights we have as a citizen of a country, and human rights, which we is still a dream. It's that dream that every human being deserves essential rights, and that it is our obligation to help human beings around the world, to achieve and protect those rights. So many of us, especially those who are proud of the country we live in, we have our passports that recognize our civil rights, but we haven't really accepted the challenge of expanding that to human rights. So I would certainly hope that one of the results of this celebration of Mahatma Gandhi's birthday will lead to a honest discussion of where we are in that long battle for human rights. It is an ideal that is worth fighting for, but it's an ideal that is only partially complete. I wish I could be with you. I think that in the future we will have other meetings, but the meetings themselves are simply reminders to us that in between the meetings has to be the activism, has to be the willingness to take risks, the willingness to accept the challenge of securing human rights everywhere in the world. And we can't do that by staying in our own country. We have to do that by working with people in many different countries. You can see with the technology right here in front of us, it's possible for us to have conversations. And I'm hoping that in the not too distant future, we will not only have conversations like this, but activism that is sustained by this technology that has brought us together today. So congratulations on your celebration. As I mentioned, I wish I could be there with you, but I'm certain that if I'm still around, I'll be able to join you in the near future. So thank you so much for inviting me. And I would look forward to listening and taking part in your discussion. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Carson, for those inspiring words. And I think every time I hear you speak, there's a challenge that you put forward, and that's where do we go from here? And I think that around the world, whoever's listened to this presentation of yours will be mulling over that. And I think that the call to action is critical. Having these conferences and so on is wonderful. But what we do in between that is the critical aspect, putting action on the ground. So thank you very much for that. It's my pleasure now to invite Ila Gandhi, who is the granddaughter of the Mahatma, to provide a response to Dr. Carson's address and to say a few words from the Phoenix and Gandhi Development Trust in Durban. Ila?
Thank you. Thanks so much, David. Thank you, Dr. Carson, for a really inspiring message. I think what you say is something that we all feel, that, we continue to go to conferences and discuss things, but in between the conferences, there needs to be action. There needs to be some progress towards peace, towards attaining the principles of nonviolence. Nonviolence is not just the absence of violence, but it is creating the conditions that would sort of eliminate the need for violence. So to create those conditions, we all need to begin to look at how we can bring about changes in the world. So thanks to Dr. Carson for bringing that message very loudly and clearly to us. And I think, the two things that Dr. Martin Luther King talked about, where to from here, and whether community or chaos. I think those two, phrases need to be really looked at and interrogated by everyone that is present here today. We really appreciate the worldwide presence of people at this webinar, and I hope that they will all engage in this discussion. Where do we go from here? And how do we look at building community rather than descending into chaos? How do we do that? I think those are the two challenges that face us today, and uh, we really need to apply our minds to that. So, thank you, Dr. Carlson, again. And I hope to, you know, I hope that there will be a lot more discussion right now. People will ask questions, people will make comments, and I hope people will make suggestions on these issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ila, for that response. We are looking at the chat now in terms of questions and comments. There's been one in terms of what Dr. Carlson mentioned on education and citizenship as it relates to human rights. And the question was, can you suggest how we can possibly create a level of congruency between the two?
I, I think this session indicates how to do that. I think education using technology, like we're using today, but also at the local level to the international level, we need to have educational programs on human rights. Um, Even a university like the one I taught at for so many years, it took the 21st century before we had a course on human rights, because no one thought it was that important to teach. And uh, and I think the same thing in terms of networking, that we have begun to develop the networks, but many people come to the networks to get information, but then they don't follow it up with action. And as you know, David, so many people who present to our work are pleading for action, are presenting us with a problem that needs a solution. And we listen with interest to it, but we don't respond with practical solutions, practical courses of action. And that's why I've told so many of the people that my model is the anti-apartheid movement. I think that it was the first nonviolent struggle, international struggle, that actually forced a powerful country to change its policies. That was an important breakthrough. It's never happened with respect to a movement about the United States. Um, there was international help for the civil rights movement, but so many countries have this sense that what happens inside the country is their own business, and they don't respond to pressures from the outside. And we have to change that so that they do begin to do that. And we have to change it by making people understand the power in their hands to bring about change internationally.
Thank you very much for that. It'll be opportune. This is not a question that came from anybody. I'm just thinking as a participant in the World House Project meetings on a Friday, uh, whether it might be with this international audience that we have now, if you could just take us through some of the things that are happening and the opportunities for people in different parts of the world to get connected.
I think there should be many more of those kinds of meetings that you've participated in. And one of the thoughts, and again using the anti-apartheid movement as an example, is that it only became successful not when it became much more than simply demonstrations, much more than protests, and it became economic pressures. Um, as you well know, probably better than I do, it was the unwillingness of people because of instability in South Africa to lend more money to the government that I think eventually brought that government down and forced it to make concessions. So I think it's that combination of political uh, pressure from below, but also economic pressure. We have in the United States and so many other countries so little influence over how our economic pressures, how banks in London, New York uh, how they can respond. And but I think that that's an area where we need to develop better strategies to put political pressure together with economic pressure.
Well, thank you very much for that. I'm just being asked a question now. Um, this is from Angela James, who's asking in terms of students working with students in creating community with care. What are your views on that?
I think that's wonderful. I think that the hope for the future obviously has to be young people. I I don't think I'm going to be living in the nonviolent world just because of my age. Uh, I think that a person who's in their 20s might have a different view of that. They don't want to live in a world that's organized by violence, and they can actually view a future where we're closer to that goal of human rights. So I think the hope is always going to be in the young, and we have to reach them, and that's another thing. On Fridays, I talk to the network, and it's mostly older people. On Mondays, I speak to teenagers, and I've been doing it for years. And I'm hoping that by the time they're my age, we're going to be closer to those goals.
Okay, here's a question for the two of you, for you and Ela. And the question is, what do you think Gandhi actually learned in South Africa? You know, in the 20 years that he experienced here in this country? What were the critical things that came out of his experience in that 20 years? Maybe Ela should go first before you, Dr. Carson.
Well, that's a good question. There are lots of things it makes, I might have to give a lecture on that myself this evening, and it'll prolong this. But I think just to summarize, he changed his lifestyle in South Africa. He came here as a young man with all the trappings of youth. He was only 24 years old. He had just qualified as a lawyer, came here to work and earn money. He was conscious of his status. He was conscious of his, position as a lawyer and his position as a wealthy person. He was not unusually wealthy, but he wasn't poor. And all those things add to a status, and that was the status that he came here with. But within 11 years of his stay in South Africa, seeing the ill treatment of the indentured workers, seeing the ill treatment of people of color, particularly African people in this country, he began to think that, he cannot live with that kind of status. That status is not acceptable, and that he has to begin to look at how the people on the ground live. So his first move was from city to the urban, rural area to live next to the people who were suffering poverty, who were living in rural areas without any services, municipal services were not there. And he went to live in this area and begin to experience what life is without all these facilities that urban life offers. So that was the first thing. And the second thing that he learned in South Africa was that, apart from looking at people, looking at the environment, learning about recycling, self-sufficiency and all that. But apart from that, it was how do we overcome some of the injustices, the terrible injustices that we face. And we continue to face them even today. But the injustices that both Martin Luther King suffered and Mandela suffered and Gandhiji suffered in different uh, times. But how does one overcome these? And so he found a non-violent way of dealing with, um, overcoming these kinds of injustices. And I think that that was the biggest lesson that he learned in South Africa, having read the scriptures, having read philosophers like Tolstoy and Ruskin, and then coming up with this idea of satyagraha or soul force, the power of non-violence, the power of truth, and that was satyagraha that he learned about in South Africa. I think I'll stop there. It's a long lecture. Thank you.
I think I would add to that anytime we look at Gandhi's influence, it was giving us that confidence that we too can change the world, even though we don't personally have a lot of power. But the power can come out of that confidence. That you know that I think one of my projects is to look at what I call the Black Gandhians, the people who came to India to learn from Gandhi. And I've known some of these people, and they came back. This was in 1936. They came back confident from that meeting that here was a method that could bring about change. And that message eventually got to Martin Luther King when he was a student and he read um, increasingly about the people who came before him, and he gained that confidence. And I'm hoping that people who read Martin Luther King's work will again learn from his experience. That each of them started out with skepticism. That the world could be changed, they could change the world. That they began to think more deeply, and they've written about this, and they've told us their life stories. And I think we need to read those with an understanding that they were sending us a message that even though uh, we seem to look at these problems as unsolvable by people as like ourselves, but that's just not true. We just need to find more people like ourselves to work with to begin to address those global problems. I,
Hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay, thank you. Trying to flip between the technology. Yeah, this is a question for Dr. Carson from Elaine Ware, who says one reason for so much violence in the world is that the arms industry benefits from fear and, of course, violence. Over $2 trillion is spent annually on militaries and nearly as much on handguns. Can we shift this dynamic by calling on everyone, churches, universities, banks, everybody, to divest from the arms industry?
I would, you know, I think I would emphasize the economic pressures. And right now, militaries and arms production is a very profitable industry. And we have to change that calculus. We have to um, recognize that uh, we can look at my travels in Africa and see that in very poor countries, why do we have militaries with very expensive weapons? Those weapons are not produced, at least mostly, in Africa. They are imported into Africa. And where do they come from? They're coming from companies that make lots of money by producing automatic weapons and heavier weapons than that. And I think we can see it in terms of the way the United States is responding to the war in Ukraine. That it can be solved simply by sending more weapons, and and not recognizing that there are other kinds of pressures that can be put on governments. So I think that that's part of the learning process that we need is um, not just where do we go from here, but how do we go from here.
Okay, thank you for that. Ila, you want to add something? I know you've been involved with the anti-nuclear movement and so on.
Yes, I think that we need to, especially the young people. Angela spoke about students. I think if every university in the world begins to pressurize their governments to stop manufacturing these weapons of mass destruction, we will have a change. I think it goes all over in every country, manufacture and buying of weapons of mass destruction. So I think really there is this possibility because young people don't, as Dr. Carson said, we are old now. We have, you know, in our minds, we know that we're not going to bring about changes before we die. But there are young people who know that in their lifetime they can get change. And this is one way in which they will be able to attain changes if they stop the arms industry, especially weapons of mass destruction. Can't hear you, David.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, can I take the liberty of posing a question myself? I know I'm not supposed to do that, but I can't let this slip by. At the World Health Network meetings, through the youth subcommittee, the idea, and this was one of the resolutions that came out of the youth symposium in Pietermaritzburg, was the idea of intergenerational uh, uh, collaboration and interaction. So I just want Dr. Carson to please just dwell on that for a moment, and because we can't, young people are the future, but the wisdom and the experience of the older generation is critical to that development. So I just thought maybe you should comment on that.
Well, I think that my comment is really based on my experience with the King Freedom Center here in California, but it's now spread across the United States. And for years now, I've been spending time on my Monday afternoons talking to teenagers. And I think it's important for people like yourself and like Ela Gandhi to make sure that those discussions are going on, what I would call intergenerational discussions. Because when we think about it, that's what a university is. It's older people speaking to younger people with the hope that that conversation will produce useful education. And sometimes it works better than other times. Um, but that's certainly the activity I've been involved in all of my life. I see my students in very important positions now, and and I hope that at least some of them remember that call of we've got this global problem to solve. And getting back to the question of weapons, you can't have a world house with automatic weapons in it. It's just not going to work. So we have to find a way to deal with the production of weapons that are bringing such destruction to the world, um, to many, many countries where young people who in their lifetimes would be unlikely to earn enough money to buy um, a machine gun. Um, they have weapons that are being imported into these countries, and that is dominating the life in these countries. And so I think that we have to find a way of using that knowledge to discourage people from buying these weapons, manufacturing these weapons, and change laws in countries so that people cannot carry these weapons openly. Uh, and those are possible achievements that could be done during this century. And and we will look back on the time when it was so easy for governments and societies to be disrupted by a relatively few number of people who exert their power through the weapons they have. So it's definitely a problem that has to get solved. I think that we need to look at that as a global problem. Many countries are greatly impacted by weapons brought in from the very few countries that manufacture most of the weapons that bring destruction to the world. And I think the United States is certainly a leader in that. Europe is a leader in that, the manufacture of these weapons. But we just need to focus on that problem. And in a few countries, we've had some success, but so far it's been very limited.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to the point that you raised earlier in terms of education for citizens, because we've seen what has happened in the US, especially as a case in point. The gun lobby is so strong that political parties win or lose based on that kind of support, so education for citizens is critical. The point that you raised. There's a question from Ms. Priya Rajan Kumar, and who's raising the issue of multi-level violence taking place in the world, including nature versus human conflicts. What would be your response to that? This is to both of you. How can we deal with multi-level violence taking place in the world, including nature versus human conflicts?
I think all of us know that the answer for that is going to come from younger people. But it is we've never really in the world faced this kind of situation where um, the not only the transfer of weapons but the transfer of ideas um, are not are not affecting this situation in a positive way. And and I think that, for example, um, we we need pressure from what is often called the third world, uh, the places that are not the United States or Europe, to put pressure on the United States and Europe for causing many of the problems in the world through the production of weapons, um, especially weapons that are not so. I'm more afraid of an automatic weapon on the street uh, than an atomic bomb that will probably never go off. Um, and that's because when you look at what's changing the world today, it's not the bigger weapons. It is the people who are carrying around automatic weapons. If they have enough of them, they can overthrow governments, they can change societies. And this is the essence of the problems that we see in many countries um, who are really victims of things that they don't produce.
Thank you for that. Ashik Malik asks you, Dr. Carson, how we can collaborate in nonviolence teaching and training of young people. And I think that through the World Health Network, you mentioned a whole range of things. So I think, yeah.
I think it is difficult. It is difficult, um, but we are finding solutions to it. We're using Team now. I use Zoom a lot um, to communicate, um, but it's still a work in progress. None of this was happening even 5 years ago. We're just at the beginning of this process. I get frustrated sometimes because I feel like our global meeting, why don't these people leave the meeting and go out and change the world? And I'm impatient um, to see that happen. But I know it's going to take another decades long struggle to bring this about. But I think patience is one of the virtues that we need to have in terms of not expecting change to occur overnight, and sometimes not in our lifetimes. Martin Luther King never saw the end of, of the struggle. Mahatma Gandhi never saw independent India. We have to accept the fact that great leaders can be unsuccessful in their lifetime, and that we we need to be okay with that. We need to understand that our children will see things that we will never see, but we can inspire them to make sure that the world will be better through their actions. So, but it's an act of faith, as you probably know. You have to have a lot of belief, and I think that both Gandhi and King and Nelson Mandela and people like that did have a lot of faith that was not sometimes not rewarded during their lifetime.
Yeah, no, thanks. It reminds me of the story of Moses. Of course, Moses never saw the promised land,
Exactly.
um, but he did a lot of work leading up to it, leading the people of Israel.
I
But
think one
thank
of
you
the
very much.
films about Elham,
Yes.
about I did a production of my play on Martin Luther King in Palestine, and it's called Martin Luther King in Palestine, and it ends with a vision from uh, the mountaintop, the
Yeah.
actual mountaintop, and
Yes.
and I'm hoping that that message get across that you might not see the mountaintop, but you have to believe that it's there.
No, thank you for that. I see Ela's got a hand up. Ela?
Yeah. I just wanted to say that Professor Ashik Malik is a professor in a university in Kashmir. And, it is an area where there's a lot of conflict as well. So just wanted to clarify that.
Perhaps what we should do is to ask Professor Malik to join the network. I think you can share the links with him because there's some very wonderful things that are happening. I know Dr. Carson has mentioned the Monday classes that he teaches on peace and nonviolence, human rights. So I think the solution to that is perhaps ask Professor Malik to join us for our Friday sessions, and also he can learn about the Monday classes that are being held every week. All right, just to make an announcement before we close, that there have been some very interesting links that have been posted on the chats from people like Elaine Ware and others. So please take the opportunity to do that. And I've been asked by Elaine herself, Ela, to thank you for endorsing the Global Appeal Project and the Global Appeal Protect the Planet, which we will be presenting to the United Nations later this month. The appeal is still open for endorsement, so please have a look at the internet in terms of this project, Global Appeal Protect the Planet, and please endorse that if you have the time. Are there any other comments? Okay, so can we ask Ela first and then Dr. Carson just to give a final comment in terms of today's session? Ela?
Okay, I think Comrade Lanfla is online and he's going to do the vote of thanks, but I would just like to say thank you to Dr. Carson for, his input today. We've learned a lot from your wisdom And I think that, you know, I would like to say to the many people from all over the world who are here on this group that, you know, they should join the Friday evening World House Network. Um, and there are lots of exciting things that are happening at the World House Network. One of them is the youth initiative that Keshav and them are taking. I think Keshav is here as well. I don't know if you want to give him an opportunity to say something, David, before Comrade Ntlantla says a vote of thanks.
I don't think it's possible, Ila, because only the presenters have got access, audio access. But certainly,
I,
if you
I will say, Keshav, that he he's an example of someone decades younger who is already making a contribution to the technology part of this. Um, one thing that I haven't mentioned is that we have um, with Keshav's help, a map, um, and we're working on developing this technology where people can know where nonviolence institutions and hopefully people are throughout the world. Um, some of you, some of you may know that I thought about this when I saw a similar thing for, I think it was Starbucks that sells coffee. And I said, well, why is it possible to find a Starbucks in practically any country in the world? And you have a very difficult time finding organizations dedicated to nonviolence transformation of the world. And so I think one thing that we can almost assure ourselves of is that in the future it'll be easier to do that. That it'll be easier to find a website where you can look and if you happen to be traveling throughout the world, be able to make contact. And because that's one of the things that has enriched my life is the more than 2 dozen countries I've visited. Each place has its own center of activism, and you just have to look for it. And if there's any guide to help us look for it, then that's a very positive thing to happen. And I encourage the people in the audience to travel and to make contact, just like at the end of the conference in South Africa. One of the things I said in the keynote there is make a pledge that during this conference you will meet people from other countries and that you will stay in touch with them and work with them and make sure that there's a variety of ages so that people of different ages are getting together regularly and know each other. That's the strongest force for nonviolence in the world today is people with similar ideals getting together, working together over a long period of time to bring about change. And the conferences, to me, that's the only real purpose of them because otherwise I'm kind of suspicious of conferences that require people to expend a lot of energy and bring a lot of um, bad things into the atmosphere through airplane travel. So there has to be a justification for these conferences that they're not just to bring people together and say I was there, but they're really to bring people together so that they will stay in touch. And that's a much harder challenge. I think you're muted again.
Yeah, sorry, Keshav has responded on the chat, and I'm going to read out the link that he's posted there. You can do that at your leisure, but I want to read it. www.turningpointsummit, one word, .org. www.turningpointsummit.org. The summit is going to be later on in the year, and it's a wonderful opportunity for
So have we been
individuals.
able to get,
Yes, Hila?
Can we get Comrade Nislamtla on?
Yes, we're going to do that now. I just wanted to just mention, because Dr. Carson mentioned Keshav specifically, I just wanted to say that he has posted something, and please be in contact with him. All right, colleagues, friends around the world, it's a wonderful discussion. Obviously, this is not the end of everything. It's a start, as Dr. Carson has challenged us. And to bring the program to a close, I'm going to invite Inslansla Ngidi, who's a member of the Gandhi Development Trust in Durban, to pass a vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Program Director. My task, though important, is a very easy one because I just have to say 2 words. Thank you. And the first person to say those words, to direct those words to, is our main speaker, Dr. Claiborne Carson. It's been an honor to be addressed by you. Your presence and participation has truly raised the profile of the organizations that have organized this event, and we have been enriched by your incisive message. Thank you very much for honoring us. Without you, this webinar would not have been the success that it is. The other person that I should direct my thanks to is David Genka, the chairperson of the Pietermaritzburg Gandhi Trust, who has proved to be a trustworthy friend and a dependable comrade to all of us who try to follow in the footsteps of Mahatma Gandhi. You have, sir, you have handled this meeting as the program director and facilitator, handled it with aplomb, and ensured that the webinar, the event, becomes as dignified as much as dignified as possible. We are really grateful, and that you were allowed, you agreed to facilitate this webinar, and we're thankful for that. I would like also to direct my thanks to Ila Gandhi herself, who continues to defy age by continuing to be the pillar of strength of the Gandhi movement. I choose to call it the Gandhi movement, who continues to be a pillar of strength. Others would say she should, as a matter of course, play that role because we're talking about her grandfather. But knowing Comrade Ila as I do, this is part of her commitment, because throughout her life, she has stood for those who promote peace, and justice. So because of that, we know that she's not doing this just because she has to honor her grandfather, but it is her contribution to ensure that the message of peace and justice that grows throughout the world. I would like at this stage, Program Director, just to pay a little attention to some of those who play the role of being the detractors of Gandhi, and who over the years have tried to besmirch his image. Even as we were preparing for this webinar, the social media was abuzz by those who would want us to view Gandhi in a negative way. And all that I would like to say at the present moment is that we should condemn those attempts to besmirch the image of Gandhi. For some of us, Gandhi made immeasurable contributions and sacrifices for all of us to be able to be where we are and play the roles that we roles. Yes, we all made, like anybody, he made mistakes. A certain stage of, of his development, he may have made wrong statements, but we should not lock him in that. We should recognize that at a particular point in his life, he rose above those prejudices. And this has drawn quite positive remarks from world luminaries. Mandela referred to Gandhi as the sacred warrior who combined ethics and morality with a steely resolve that refused to compromise with the oppressor, the British Empire. Martin Luther King regarded Gandhi as a guiding light. So we stand with those luminaries in praise, in the recognition of the contribution, of the positive contribution that Gandhi played in his during his life. And that is why we associate ourselves with anything that is Gandhi. And that is why we view today, the birthday of Gandhi, as a very important event in our calendar. Finally, let me thank all those, both in South Africa and abroad, who have participated in this webinar, particularly with comments and questions. They have truly made this webinar a success and raised the profile of this webinar. We hope that we will be together again when we next celebrate Gandhi. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tinslaslaw, for those kind words. I just want to add to the thanks, a special thanks to Denzel Chetty and Richard Wright from UNISA, who facilitated the technical side of the webinar tonight. Richard is in Cape Town and Denzel is in Pretoria. It's the might of technology, Dr. Carson, that we can do these things from different places at the same time. Dr. Carson has also shared his link on the chat. So please, if you want to contact him, it's there. I'm going to read it out. C. Carson, C as in Carson, C. Carson at stanford.edu, edu. So he'll be quite happy to receive anything from you. I just want to end, colleagues and friends around the world, by saying that we got to bring this thing closer to where we are. You know, we're not going to be able to change the world all at one time, but each of us can do our little bit to where we are. You know, Gandhi said, his famous quote was, be the change you want to see in the world. Let us be that in our families, in our schools, in our communities, in our workplaces. That will make the difference in terms of peace and nonviolence in the world. With those few words, thank you very much. And good night, good morning to everybody. And until next time. Bye.
Thank you.
So much. Thank you, Dr. Carson, David, everybody.
Thank you all. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay. Okay, bye-bye.